Hello, AV Tweeps and AV Tweeps adjacent. Welcome to brAVe Skills. brAVe Skills is a practical offshoot of the Brave Space podcast, where we explore some of the topics most impactful to the world of business, corporate culture, and leadership. I'm Britt.
And I'm Leon. And like we said, we like to focus on skills with this show. And so we're hoping that something that we discuss today will be helpful for you, or by extension, someone you know.
Before we get started here, we do have two disclaimers for you. The first is that opinions expressed in this podcast are our own and not necessarily representative of our companies, institutions, or sponsors of the show. And the second is that we appreciate listeners' grace and understanding as we tackle topics we are not necessarily experts in.
So now, on to the episode.
Yay! All right, so in our last episode, we talked about work-life balance, and that led us to a sort of natural progression of the topic of burnout. So, Leon, what is burnout?
Oh, well, I was actually going to say, Britt, what is burnout? All right, I'm put on the spot. Here, what is burnout? I think I define it weirdly for myself, but generally speaking, I think of it in an analogy instead of a definition, because I'm a visual person and it's how I process the world. So I think about an actual like candle wick. Um, again, time capsule. I don't know what the ages are of all the people that listen to this. I don't know if it's the generation that also sees the floppy disk in the save the menu on their computer and go, "What is that?" Maybe, but there are candles. Um, young AV folks, there's a time when it wasn't electricity. No, there were candles and they had little wicks. So when you see the wick and it's burning down, eventually it's gone. There's no light. There's nothing to burn anymore. There's no fuel. It cannot burn anymore. I think of that image, and that helps me understand burnout. So like not like being stressed or being like disillusioned, but just whatever state you're in when suddenly there's no more fuel. That's how I define that. I don't know if that's a sufficient enough definition for anyone that might be listening. So I'll ask you, Britt, what is burnout?
Yeah, so I love the way you described that because I'm also a visual person. I was right there with you picturing it, and I feel like you really did it justice. So when I was prepping for this recording, I actually did some Googling. So this goes back to the disclaimer if we're not experts. This was a literal, let me Google that for you moment. So listeners, I Googled this for you.
I was actually cracking up this time during the intro when you said that, because I'm thinking we say that there's a disclaimer, and I almost wonder if there's first time listeners who are going like, "Oh man, they're about to go off the hinges. What is going on?" Like, just so you know, none of these people are responsible. No, it's not that. It's more of a humility thing.
Yes.
But please continue. Please continue.
So, I actually started my Google search with what is the difference between stress and burnout? Because I was trying to figure out, like, is burnout just an extreme version of it? Like, where is the line? So it said that stress is a reaction to pressure and demands, while burnout is a state of exhaustion that can result from chronic stress. Which kind of, if we relate it to your candle analogy, stress is the candle is burning, burnout is the candle is depleted, right? And
Mhm.
then I had questioned what are the symptoms of burnout? Because I think that we all have a concept to us and our bodies what stress feels like. But in general terms, what does burnout feel like? And it said that burnout can make you feel empty, mentally exhausted, devoid of motivation, and beyond caring. You might feel detached from your job or daily tasks, and it can make you feel hopeless or ineffective. And that led me to another Google adventure, which was what is the difference between burnout and depression?
Mm.
And then it basically said, consult your doctor, which is
Yeah.
totally fair.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, what I would say to anyone listening, if as I was reading off that search result and you heard feelings of emptiness, mental exhaustion, not feeling motivated to the point that it's using the word devoid of motivation and beyond caring, feeling detached. Like those are all symptoms of something deeper. And I would say at that point, don't always self diagnose. It's probably best at that point to literally seek professional guidance, which is awesome. I can't recommend go to the experts enough.
Yeah. I so as Britt mentioned earlier, our previous episode sort of inspired us to do this episode, talking about burnout. Well, when we thought about, so it's kind of like almost like a part two here. So go check out that episode. Um, when we were talking about this concept and looking into talking about the concept of work life integration, it for me made me think about the extreme where there is no good integration or there's just a lack or very not balanced integration, which I think we should also recognize that we're not going to recommend that there's one level of this or even one route to it or one route away from it. Every person is different. Your capacity for anything going on in your life is different from me, is different from Britt. You need to be able to recognize whether or not you need help, by having some canaries in the coal mine, probably for yourself, which is oftentimes, at least for me, is another person. It's oftentimes another person that can say something to me about when it looks like I might be running on empty if I'm not noticing it. So the idea of professional help, I would maybe say like help in general as well too. Professional help is amazing. There's a step maybe before professional help, not because you should not go to it directly. I mean, someone may also be talking to you, and that's also maybe someone that's trying to help you too. So if you if you're needing motivation toward that, towards seeking professional help, there's a good chance that somewhere along the line you hopefully have someone in your corner who is advocating for you to be in a better place.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, what we would like to encourage during this episode too, is that we're not necessarily experts, but um, if you're thinking about whether or not you are struggling with symptoms of burnout, we have some symptoms, right, that we've mentioned, but ultimately knowing if that's where you're going, especially for depression, do not suffer in silence.
Mhm.
That's really all I'm trying to get out here is don't suffer in silence. It's actually a mantra almost that I've had for several years as a manager that I used to say with teams. I actually still say it, which I use for pretty much everything. Someone has a question and they don't want to ask they don't want to ask the question because they don't want to look silly, or they need help but they don't want to ask because they think they're going to look weak, or whatever. They feel like they have to take it all on their shoulders. I'm usually like, you need to have a window of time before you say, okay, I'm beyond what I can do. I need to reach out. Do not suffer in silence.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that's some of the helpful ways out of it would be to seek professional help, to reach out in general. I think in this episode, we one of the things we want to encourage people to recognize is it's it's possible for it to happen. So maybe have some practice to help you not get there.
Yes,
Um,
so let's not to cut you off, but I really wanna go there because I find it so
mhm.
interesting, um, and putting depression aside, because that's a whole other beast, but if you are recognizing it's not depression, it's been verified for me, it's not depression, it's burnout, and so let's talk
Mm.
about burnout. Like, how do you get to the point from stress to burnout?
I I feel like this might be different for everybody, so I'm gonna go ahead and say I may be overgeneralizing, but it's certainly true for me and for some that I know that have struggled with burnout. Um, I'm talking about people that work in some kind of leadership role as well.
Mm,
Um, there are things that I think are uniform across the board for those of us that work in leadership, and so hopefully these make sense. But For me, there were 3 main causes that came to my mind immediately. That some of those causes are there's alliteration going on here, and oh, look at me, I got alliteration. One of them is what I call weight of the world syndrome.
Mm,
Um, and by the way, 2 out of the 3 of these things that I'm mentioning are things that I have actively struggled with myself. Um, but weight of the world syndrome is where I say you might have this idea in your mind that I have to take on everything myself. I have to take on everything myself on my shoulders. It's not that uncommon for someone that is leading people to feel that way
mm,
sometimes and maybe all the time. Um, that is one that I think is really, really common. So it's the first one that stands out to me. And it's also the main one that I struggled with and still today have to make sure that I avoid letting myself fall into very deliberately, honestly. Um, is that one that you feel like makes sense, like in your world, and that you see as well?
oh, yeah, that definitely makes sense to me, and for me, I have learned through therapy over the years how to set boundaries and how to set boundaries with different people and different walks of my life
Hmm.
because this weight of the world thing, like, manifested very differently with my family than with my work. You know, I might be able to delegate at work or put things down or recognize, like, that's not me, because what's nice about work is we have job descriptions, right? Like, there's some piece of paper somewhere that says what is my responsibility and what is not my responsibility, and when it comes down to brass tacks, I can say, "Oops, not for me, don't need that weight, it's actually not my thing." But there's no job description for being a daughter or a wife or a daughter-in-law. So, I feel like that's actually where the weight of the world comes in for me, and having to
Mhm.
learn, like, those boundaries and how to handle those relationships and what feels like it is my responsibility versus what feels like it's not.
Yeah, that's I love that you just said that there's no job description for those. Yeah, it is certainly easier when it's your 9 to 5, which heck, we just said it all like 9 to 5. We're implying that at some point it stops. The responsibility stops at some point and you do something else, be someone else, whatever, however you feel that is, or how that manifests in your life. Um, the weight of the world syndrome often for me uh, does go beyond work as well. What's funny is for me, I have a block of time on my schedule. I just talked about this with a guy on my team. Block of time on my schedule called end of day prep, which is just me. It's just blocked out. No one can schedule my time at that point. And the reason for that is yes, because it helps me get ready for the next day, but it also helps me do what I call descending.
Mhm.
Helps me descend a bit. And so I may have been carrying some weight at that point, but it's this is my time to start to unload that, which sometimes for me is just writing things down and or sometimes it's passing the note to the next person to delegate for the next day or whatever has to happen there. But it's a signal. Like I have to have that practice to make myself do it, or
Mhm.
otherwise I know myself. I'll just sit and continue nose to the grindstone on that thing until someone reminds me that I need to stop and eat dinner or something like that. It's very possible. So there's an element of like know thyself in this. It's, what is it? Confucius? It's either Confucius or just a popsicle that I read. I don't know, but someone said that know thyself, and whoever it was, wise person. Um, there's a second cause that stands out to me, and that's this fear of failing, or I like to think of it more as like a fear of falling.
Mhm.
This is one I haven't struggled personally with as much, but I still sort of know the feeling. This one, you could kind of put a quote around it that says, I have to do everything perfectly.
Mhm.
I cannot mess up. I have to succeed. I have something to prove. Um, that one is a slippery one. I see. people struggle with this hard, who oftentimes are in some underrepresented group. So sometimes that's ethnicity, sometimes that's gender, sometimes it's something else. They're basically coming many times. They're coming from a place of not maybe having as much power,
Mhm.
and they seem to have that thought in their mind a lot of I have to get this right. I have to because otherwise the world will crumble.
Mm.
Maybe not people that are depending on me, but the world will crumble. The worldview of me will crumble. This will affect things. There's no going back. All of this, I have to prove. I have to prove. But I also see it the other way too. So I still think it's universal when someone's actually in a position of power and a position of great success, continued success, feeling like you have to maintain perfection.
Mhm.
That if you were to, that when you're at the top, there's, we always say, well, when you're at the bottom and you're having a bad day, there's nowhere else but up, right? It can only get better from here. But when everything is roses, then the worry sometimes becomes, oh no, the only place I can go from here is either maintain this marathon pace, or I go down. And down sounds terrible because I'm not used to it. I've always been a high performer, and that's what
Mhm.
people expect of me. Um, so you run the risk of sort of the it's a weird expression, but the wheel is turning, but the hamster is dead. It's a really weird
Mhm.
um, where you're just spinning and spinning and trying, but again, that you fizzled out. It's just motions at that point, and you're just numb. Yeah, I don't know if that's another one. Uh, I want. Oh, actually, I'll just straight up say this. I wondered about this. Britt happens to be fairly successful at what it is that she does. This thing that we do right now. She's not bad at it. If this is your first time hearing her, she's pretty good at talking through tough subjects and shining light on those things. Um, that said, I've I see you as a person that I wonder how many folks who don't know you but know you,
Mhm. Mhm.
of you, may have super high expectations. And I don't mean to stress you out, but from your perspective, what does fear of failure sound like in your world, whether it's for you personally or people that you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, so I actually remember when I was in high school, I was in this, I wanna say sociology class, or it was, like, sociology adjacent, because it was high school, but, the teacher had asked us to write down and share what our biggest fear was, and mine was failure. My biggest fear was failure, and I felt that way a long time. And for me, I knew these were my high school days, like junior, senior year, so tail end. I was thinking about college. I knew that I was coming from a very challenging financial situation, that I was going to be the first in my family to pursue a 4-year degree. It felt like all of it was scary. I didn't know what I was doing, and like it was kind almost weight of the world syndrome too, right? Because it was like I have something to prove here, like for myself
Mhm.
and for my family, and if I fail, I have failed really hard and bad, and I messed up everything, and my life is over. And it doesn't help that when you're a teenager, you catastrophize everything.
Mhm.
um, and it wasn't until I got older, I got more life experience, I met new people, I went to therapy, I cannot stress this enough,
Mhm.
that I learned my only competition is myself, and I only need to feel bad about things if I let myself feel bad about it. You know what I mean? Like, what is failure? It didn't go the way I expected. Do I really need to feel bad about that? And
Mhm.
most of the time, no. Sometimes you try and it doesn't work. It's just life.
Yeah. I can say from my perspective, I was raised, there's one thing from my mom. There are many things that were good from my mom, but there's one thing that has never left me, and I've recognized the value of it as I've met other people that didn't maybe have the same didn't have the same mom. I'll just say that, or didn't have someone else saying this. I didn't grow up with a fear of failure,
Mm.
and I didn't fail all the time at things that I would tried, but I was never discouraged from it from my mom. So I was always fine trying everything, like anything. And if it didn't work, I would like improvise it into something. I would improvise the result into something else, and I felt fine about it, and I'd move on. That was just me as a kid because honestly of stuff from my mom. However, then adult life hit around the same time as what you were talking about, or getting close to adult life. And same idea. We didn't come from a ton of money. And my mom had said that she really wanted me to have better than she had. She wanted me to have more money than she had. She was a single mom raising me and my sister. And I took all that to heart. Weight of the world hits me a little bit, but then also fear of failing. Like, oh no, I need to not make a wrong choice here on what I do in college or what it's gotta it's we're spending the money now and then we gotta figure out all the things now and not fail at this. And I did get paralyzed for a second there. So I'm saying that to say, even with that encouragement to not have a fear of failing, it's still possible for that to come in at some point. And I had to do what you're saying too, is recognize that I did not have to have that fear. I did not have to worry about that, but it's still something I had to remind myself of, for sure, and still today have to remind myself of, um, as well.
Yeah.
I've got one more.
What is it?
Third one, uh, really kind of a totaled engine. No alliteration here.
Mm.
If you're a car person, you know that when your car is totaled, it is totaled. Um, Maybe a better way of saying this, actually, bad car analogy, is dead battery syndrome, which feels like we're just defining burnout. But what I mean is, if you have those old batteries, or not old batteries, the batteries where you could top them up or top
Mhm.
them off, pour stuff in them, and then they would continue working if they died, then you'll understand this concept. But letting the tank get empty without also filling it, this practice, that's what I'm talking about, the practice of not filling the tank. Uh, this is one that hit home for me.
Mm.
All of the others were happening, but really where I struggled the most, I alluded in the last episode, that at one point I was hospitalized. It was this. I was not filling my tank, and instead I was constantly expelling from my tank. For
Mhm.
myself, for others, for everything. Everything was output. Everything was output. Sleep. What is sleep? That was sort of the idea. Um, Sleep was a means to an end. Sleep was, I have to sleep because I have to. It wasn't sleep is going to help me. So I didn't really do it.
Mhm.
Um, I thought that I was best when I was awake. So I just stayed awake and did everything I could. But I wasn't doing the things that recharged me personally. I'm a social person. So being with people actually is a recharge for me. Um, being able to talk with being able to talk with folks sometimes is a recharge. Just sitting and just being in the presence of folks. I wasn't really doing that. If I was in your presence, it's probably because I was doing something I had to do. Fun, that word, right? That's a
Yeah.
word. It's more than just a word. I wasn't really pursuing that. Um, and I think the concept I'd say here, and I'll probably share the story, but I want to bounce over to you, Britt, with this. But the concept here is that you may have to jumpstart a car battery because something goes wrong with it, and that's not the worst. But if you're jumping the car a lot, which I recently did, by the way, because I had a dead battery and I just
No,
was not
that's the worst.
replacing it. I had even a spare charger that I kept. I was driving in the car with my charger, thinking, this is stupid. I should be replacing the battery. I know I should, but I'll just keep recharging it. Or I'll just keep jumping it, rather. I wasn't charging it, I was just jumping it. That's not healthy over time. You shouldn't be doing that constantly. Everyone needs one every once in a while, but if it's constant, that's the problem. Um, I'd say find that thing. Find the thing that recharges you for sure. Um, Actually, I'll go ahead and share the story briefly. Told you I was hospitalized. I feel like I should mention it more here. It was COVID time, the dark
Mm.
ages. It was 2020. I was sitting down eating a bowl of cereal, Honey Nut Cheerios to be precise, so you can paint the picture with me. I was sitting down, eating a bowl of cereal and looking over some emails. We were all working remotely at the time, and I had just gotten a new role uh, in the last month. And this role was probably one of the largest I've ever had. All of a sudden, the operation that I was in charge of was massive. Second largest budget in our company, second only to facilities management. This was a new team, had never been done before. A lot of things were wrapped into it. And then COVID happened, and we had to be completely digital with our business. And it so happened that I was the manager of digital services. So all of it, that was not what was supposed to happen, but all of the everything we did was riding on, as far as I was concerned, was riding on the output from this team that we were forming. And I did not take that very well. I let the tank get empty for sure. Wasn't refilling it. Wasn't taking care of myself. And then there was a straw that broke the camel's back. I was looking at the night before eating Cheerios in the morning. I was looking at our bank statement, and we weren't out of money, but all of a sudden I just saw $1,000 just disappear, and was like, what is that? What is that? And it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Is the bank going to replace it? Yes. It was a errant transaction. It turned out to be some
Mhm,
weird, sort of almost fraudulent thing. Someone made a mistake. It wasn't us. It was rectified, and I know that that's going to be the case. But there's still that moment of stress, and it was enough of a you just blow
mhm,
on me, and I was going to go over that cliff. It was enough so that then I had the delayed reaction when I was sitting down in the morning eating breakfast, and all of a sudden my heart would not stop racing. I just remember it was over 100 something, and it would not stop for it was at least an hour of me checking it. I happened to have the Apple Watch on and was checking my just checking my heart rate, and I had another thing for checking it as well. Um, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. It felt like I was running a marathon. It felt like I was going to pass out. I didn't think I was having a heart attack, but I didn't understand it. I called my wife at work and said, I don't know what's going on, but I think I'm probably going to have to go to the hospital. And I did. Um, After 5 minutes, that's enough. That's enough to just lay you out a little bit at
mhm,
that specific rate. Um, and all I was doing was sitting down, just sitting down. I tried laying down, tried calming down, nothing would do it. Went to a doctor, and when I went to the doctor, they had determined what was going on. The essentially, I guess, I forgot I don't know the word for it, but um, their advice. This is basically burnout had already happened, but their advice was you should be reducing stress. So your googling was correct. You should be reducing stress for sure. And you should probably be talking to a therapist or a counselor. And coincidentally, I had actually already been recommended to do that by a doctor, and I hadn't done it.
mhm,
Um, I needed to take the time, and I didn't take it, and then I hit burnout. Like not only just exhaustion, but uh, getting to the point of like numbness. And it did not have to happen. It did not have to happen. Um, Stressors around me, someone can blame them all they want, but ultimately I didn't make the choice to stop when I needed to and to look for help when I needed to. Um, I will just say I came back with a fury about the concept of burnout.
mhm,
Um, and was like, no one in my presence is going to deal with this without having heard me first say that we can avoid it. Every person on my team, every person I talked to was like, look, reach out for help when you need it. If you need to stop, we need to stop. We will talk about it. Your health is more important. None of our metrics, none of our bottom lines, nothing that this business is doing is any more important than you. And we can't do it if you die anyway. So we should talk about that and do what we need to do. If you're getting a little crispy, I might send you home. And we're not using PTO, by the way. Just be like, go home,
mhm,
go do something else.
mhm, mhm.
Go read, go study something.
Thank
So,
you for sharing that,
mhm.
um, because that's a very personal thing, and one thing I heard you say when you were telling about that experience was, "As far as I was concerned, everything was on me." So it kind of goes back to that weight of the world thing, and I would say one thing we can walk away with as an action item for preventing burnout is to make sure your expectations are aligned. Don't put more pressure on yourself than other
Mhm.
people are actually putting on you. And don't be afraid to have those conversations of, I think you expect this of me. Can you confirm or deny that? Essentially, like, can you summarize for me what your expectations are of me
Mhm.
for this project, in this moment, for this meeting, whatever? And just lay it out on the table instead of making assumptions and feeling like people are expecting me to achieve. And maybe they're like, man, I'm so glad Leon showed up today. I've been worried about him. Maybe I should send him home.
Maybe, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that's it's funny because like we sit here and we talk through these things, and it's like we have this advice, and it's easy to think through these things in these moments because we're not in those moments, you know? But at the same time, I'm thinking back and going, I can remember saying some of these things to others. And but then
Mhm.
when it was me, right, it wasn't immediately obvious. And I would imagine that there's probably lots of people who have that same concept where they may be giving advice to others and not doing their own because they're not even thinking about it for themselves. Um, Almost word for word what you just said, I said to somebody that was they were so sure they had to achieve this, that, and the other, and I went, "I don't know if that's right. You should ask that. Have you asked that?" I just asked, and they're like, "No." Well, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, they didn't, which was sad, but yeah, we it is easy sometimes for us to see out there something. And hopefully, in this conversation, what people take away as an encouragement is to do a little bit of introspective looking too at yourself. Try these things out. But that is fantastic, fantastic advice that I wish I had coming at me at the time of ask if this expectation's right. And even if it is, it could be an unrealistic expectation. So,
Right. Yeah, and you always have the opportunity to say, "I have X, Y, and Z on my plate. You have told me you expect me to do A. Can you help me reprioritize so that
mhm,
I don't have so much on my plate?" But you have to sit down and have the conversation and be honest about how sometimes there's just too much on that plate. Don't
mhm.
feel like you need to be a superhero. And, this is some of this, to be honest, is the pot calling the kettle black. And maybe we should make a bingo card for listeners for all the cliches we managed to use throughout an episode. But,
Ooh. I'll
I,
count them in the edit. We'll put a counter up.
yes.
That would probably be a little tone deaf. Maybe I won't do that.
I have noticed that sometimes I like expect so much more of myself than my direct reports, and like I
Mhm,
still am expecting a lot of myself and holding myself to a high standard higher than what other people are holding me to. Like I struggle with these things all the time. Um, and one of the pieces of advice I love to give, but I only sometimes take is the concept of having an overflowing cup. So to pour into yourself and care for yourself so much that your cup isn't full, your cup is overflowing. And the reason we want overflow is it's because that excess is what you give to others. You're not supposed to have a full cup and then pour it out, and now your cup is getting empty. Your cup is supposed to be always overflowing. You are always
mhm,
taking care of yourself first, and now you have excess to give to others. That's why I also hear the analogy a lot of like, put your oxygen mask on before assisting others. And I don't like that
mhm.
one as much because in that situation, we both got a mask. We're not getting the same thing for, like I want me to have the most and then you can have.
If you are on a plane, one of those disclaimers, if you are on a plane and the masks come down, do listen to the flight attendants.
Yeah, yeah,
Please
it
catch
only
that what
doesn't
we were
work as
saying is
an analogy, it works in
yes,
real life.
we're talking about this as an analogy. I don't want anyone getting on a plane next to Brit going, "I heard what you said. Can I please move?" Because she told me
I'm out here just
that
grabbing masks.
she doesn't want me to have, what she has. Anyway, I really love the expression. I had never heard it as an expression, but I like the concept of what you're bringing up there. Uh, yeah, I th that resonates with me big time, that the cup should be running over. We should be always in a state where the cup is running over. Um, Honestly, that's the safest place to be.
Mhm,
That means, yeah, like you said, you can't be empty ever if you're also running over.
mhm.
And if you're e even if it doesn't work, if you're trying to fill to that point, you're being conscious about it. You're avoiding being able to run out. Um, yeah, that's that's a pretty powerful one. Learn the word no. Learn
Yes.
the word no. Um, Say yes to the things that are going to fill you. Say yes to the things that work in your purview, that match your values and the things that are important to you. Um, Reject those things that are completely opposite. They will just suck you dry. And for what? You know, I don't
Yes.
know.
So I keep a digital bullet journal. That's one of the ways that I keep my cup overflowing as much and often as possible is to carve out time and sit down and journal things out and do it in a way that's aesthetically pleasing. And one of the things that I added to my journal was four spells to keep inside your mouth, which is a poem by Nikita Gill, and it says within the poem, no, a single commanding two-letter spell with the ability to liberate you if only you learn to use it unapologetically and cast it without fear. And so every now and again, I revisit that in my journal to remind myself how powerful the word no is and how I have the right to cast it.
I already know how I want to close this episode. And I don't know if we're going to get copyright struck. So continue watching. If the episode goes up, that means we didn't get copyright struck. I'm not going to tell Brett either. It'll be a surprise.
Ooh, I love surprises. Leon knows I love the surprise edits.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, that I almost feel like we should probably talk about our takeaways. And we've mentioned a few.
Mhm.
Um, there's a part of me that feels like that might be the biggest one. Or the big two here are learn to say no and be okay with it. And you may have another set here. I'll say my two. Learn to say no and be okay with it. And then uh, the second one is learn to have a practice of refilling or constantly filling you.
Yes. Yes, and I totally co-sign those 2, and I would add the management of expectations.
Mhm.
And, I talked a lot about what that looks like in the workspace and gave some examples of language that you would use, but keep in mind there that expectation comes into life as well, and don't be afraid to talk to partners,
Mhm.
siblings, friends, about where you're at, what expectations are. I think like I said before, I feel like sometimes those are arguably even harder because there's no job description for that. You're just winging it and trying to figure out what makes me good in this role. And sometimes you have to have honest conversations with people and say like, do you actually need me to be at that party? I'm actually feeling this kind of
Mhm.
way. How do we feel about the movies on Tuesday? Whatever. Like you can be honest with the people who are close to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I co-sign that. Tangent that, sign that, algebra. What is it? Trigonometry. I trigonometry that.
I love
Hmm.
math. right. Well, with those action items squared away, let's go ahead and round out this episode. And that means now I say the outro, which is that we hope that this episode gave you
Did
something
that
new
on
to think
purpose.
about. Leon's over here
No,
laughing. I'm
no,
sure
go
he
ahead. Go ahead. I'll try not to crack up in the background. She's doing the thing that makes me chuckle. I'm going to mute myself. Go ahead.
We hope that this episode gave you something new to think about in your professional and personal journey, and maybe even expanded your perspective on your own experiences. If you have any topics you would like to discuss on the show, you can let us know on X, LinkedIn, or in the Google form linked in the show notes. If you liked this show, please let us and the world know by giving us as many stars as you can manage on your podcast player of choice. And for easy updates, be sure to subscribe to brAVe Space.
Oh. Salagadoola, menchikaboola, bibbidi bobbidi.
No.
Put them together, and what have you got? Bibbidi bobbidi.
No.